Salt, that was the first wrong thing. Standing my post at the cistern stair on the riverside of Harrowgate Palace, an hour past midnight, I smelled salt on a man who had no business smelling of the sea. I knew his step before I saw his face. Master Corwin Vale, controller of the outer household, had a walk that announced itself quick, light. A man who hurried because he liked the look of hurry, who wanted to be seen always arriving somewhere important. He came down the servants' passage from the wine cellars, where no controller goes at midnight, and he carried a lantern hooded so low it threw barely a coin of light on the stone. He was dressed for weather. A traveling cloak over his court coat, river boots instead of court shoes, and on the salt wind that breathed up the cistern stair from the water gate, I caught the smell of tar and brine and cold tied off him as he passed, the smell of a man who had been standing on a wharf, or means to. I did not move. That is the first thing you learn, and the last. A guard of the Queen's house does not move at the unexpected, he watches it. So I watched Master Vale come down the passage with his hooded lantern and his river boots, and I marked the hour, and I marked the door he was making for, and I let the cold do its work on me and kept my face stone. He stopped when he saw me, just for a breath. A man who thinks he is alone in a dark place will always stop when the dark turns out to have a soldier in it. "Sergeant Aldous Reyne," he said, and he made my name sound like he was doing me a favor by remembering it. "You keep late hours." "It is my post, Master Vale." "So it is, so it is." He came closer into the spill of the wall sconce above my shoulder, and now I could see his face, narrow, clever, pleased with itself even now, even sweating in a traveling cloak in the dead middle of the night. And a tedious post it must be, the cistern stair, nothing down here but the water gate and the old cistern and the rats. He smiled. "I do not envy you the rats. I do not mind them, Master Vale. What I minded was the salt. What I minded was the river boots and the hooded lantern and the cloak, and a controller of the household, a man whose whole office is ink and ledgers, and the counting of candle ends, coming down to the one door in the whole of Harrowgate that opens straight onto the black water of the river, at the 1 hour when the palace sleeps and the river runs high. The water gate. I had stood near it 100 nights and watched nothing come through it but the laundry barge at dawn and twice a year the wine. It was a gate the palace had nearly forgotten. Below the cistern, below the kitchens, an iron grill and a slip of stone where a small boat could come right up out of the dark, and a man could step from the river into the heart of the Queen's house without passing a single gate, a single torch, a single roll of the watch. "I have business at the water gate," Master Vale said, as though he had read the question off my face. "Stores, a shipment that could not wait for daylight, delicate goods, you understand, that spoil in the heat. The steward's office knows of it. He let that sit. You needn't trouble yourself. In fact," and here the smile sharpened, "in fact, Sergeant, it would be a kindness if you forgot you saw me at all. A small kindness. The household runs on small kindnesses quietly done. I shall remember it." There it was. Not yet an order. A man like Vale does not start with an order. He starts with a kindness and a hint of reward and the easy assumption that of course you will take it, because of course everyone takes it, because the household is a great machine of small kindnesses quietly done, and a sergeant of the gate is the smallest, most forgettable cog in it. "What stores, Master Vale?" I said. The smile did not move, but something behind it did. "I beg your pardon. You said a shipment, delicate goods. I will need to see the steward's chit and the manifest. Nothing comes through a palace gate without a chit and a manifest. You know the rule better than I do. You wrote half of them." "The rule," he breathed it out slowly. "Sergeant Reyne, the rule is a sensible thing in daylight. At this hour between sensible men, the rule is, let us say, generous enough to bend. You will see the chit in the morning. I give you my word." "Then I will see the goods in the morning too," I said, "by daylight through the steward's gate with the manifest. The water gate stays barred tonight. I am sorry, Master Vale. It is my post." I watched the kindness drain out of his face. It went in stages, like water leaving a cracked basin. The smile first, then the warmth behind the smile, then the patience behind the warmth, until all that was left was the narrow, clever man who was sweating in a traveling cloak, and very much wanted me to do a small thing and forget it, and had just understood that I would not. "You are making a mistake," he said, and his voice had gone flat and cold, the voice he used on understewards and footmen, the voice that had ended careers in the household for less than a barred gate. "You are a sergeant of the gate, Reyne. Do you know how many sergeants of the gate there are in Eldermoor? Do you imagine you are difficult to replace?" "No, Master Vale," I said. "I imagine I am very easy to replace. That is rather the point of me. I am a thing the Queen can replace and still be sure her gate is barred. If I let her gate be unbarred for a kindness, I am of no use to anyone, least of all her." He looked at me for a long moment. And then, this is the part I have turned over in my mind 1,000 times since. He did not bluster, and he did not threaten further, and he did not turn and go back up the passage to his bed like a man caught in the wrong place at the wrong hour. He nodded slowly, as if I had told him something useful, as if I had shown him the shape of the obstacle so that he might go around it. "Of course," he said, mild again, mild and false. "Of course, you are quite right, the rule is the rule." He drew his cloak tighter. "Forgive an old man his impatience, Sergeant. I shall send up the chit in the morning, and we will do it all properly by daylight through the steward's gate. As you say." And he turned and went back up the passage toward the cellars, his light step quick and pleased again, his hooded lantern bobbing, the smell of salt and tar trailing behind him into the dark. I stood at my post and listened to him go, and I did not believe one word of it. Because here is the thing about a man who has come down in river boots at midnight to meet a boat at a forgotten gate. He does not go to bed because a sergeant told him no. He goes to find another door. And there is always another door. Harrowgate is 1,000 years of doors, secret stairs, dry conduits, walled-up postern gates that some old king cut and some later king forgot. Vale had served the household for 30 years. He knew the palace the way I knew my own boots. He had come to the water gate because it was the nearest dark door to the river. Barred from it, he would simply use another. And I had just told him, by barring it, exactly where my eyes were and exactly where they were not. I had won the door. I had not won the night. And somewhere out on the Black River, a boat was waiting for a man who had promised it would not be turned away. I did not leave my post. A guard does not leave his post. That is the iron of it, the whole iron of the thing. But I have 2 eyes and 2 ears and a brain behind them. And while my boots stayed planted on the cold stone of the cistern stair, my mind went out into the dark of the palace and began, very quietly, to hunt. Let me tell you the shape of the place, so you understand the trap I was standing in. Harrowgate Palace, seat of the Royal House of Harrowgate, Kingdom of Eldermoor, is not one building. It is a town of stone grown together over 1,000 years. The old keep at the heart, the great halls flung out around it, the new wings the last 3 queens added, the kitchens and cellars and cisterns dug down into the rock beneath, all of it stitched with passages and stairs and conduits that no living man holds entire in his head. The river runs along its eastern face. On that face are 3 gates: the steward's gate, where the stores come in by daylight under the watch's eye, the bridge gate, where the great folk come and go in their carriages, and the water gate at the foot of the cistern stair, where nothing comes in at all, or so we like to believe. I am Sergeant Aldous Reyne of the Queen's House Guard, and that night I held the river's side. 40 years old, 22 of them in the harness, 8 in the old border companies before I ever saw a palace, 14 here in the red and the steel. I am not a clever man. I want that on the record because what follows might make you think otherwise, and it would be a lie. I am a plain man who learned one thing very well, that a post is a promise, and a promise kept is the only thing a man like me has to give that is worth anything to anyone. Our Queen is Saralind, 3rd of her name, and I will say plainly that I love her, in the way a soldier is allowed to love the thing he guards. She is good. I do not mean she is gentle, though she is that. I mean she is just, which is harder and rarer. She came to the throne young and grieving, her mother the old queen dead of a fever, her own husband, the prince consort Aldrich, a quiet steady man who keeps to the children and the gardens and never once reached for power that was not his. They have two, the Princess Malin, who is 8 and afraid of nothing, and the Prince Joran, who is 10 and afraid of a great many things and ashamed of it, which I think makes him braver than his sister, though no one tells him so. I have carried the princess on my shoulders at the harvest fair when she could not see the tumblers. I have stood outside the prince's door when the storms came and he could not sleep, and pretended not to hear him crying, because a boy needs to believe a soldier did not hear. These are the people whose gate, Master Vale, wished me to leave unbarred for a kindness. So the hunt. I could not leave the cistern stair, but the cistern stair is not blind. From where I stood I could see up the servants' passage to the cellar door Vale had come through, and I could see, through a slit window in the river wall, a long slice of the black water and the wharf below the steward's gate. And I had a voice, and there are men I trust within the sound of it. Young Pelham had the next post up at the cellar mouth, a guardsman of 2 years, eager, a little raw, but honest as daylight and quick on his feet. I gave a low whistle 2 notes, the call that means come without noise. He came. I told him fast and flat what I had seen, the controller, the river boots, the salt, the hooded lantern, the lie about the stores, the bar I had set on the gate. I told him Vale had gone back up not to bed but to find another way down to the water, and I told him what I needed. I need eyes on the water gate from the river side, I said. I cannot leave this post. If he doubles back I have to be standing here, or the whole thing is for nothing. But I need to know if a boat comes. Take the river walk to the laundry stair. You can see the water gate slip from the second landing. If a boat comes up out of the dark and ties off at that gate, you come back and tell me, and you run, you do not stroll. Do you understand? A boat, Pelham said, at the water gate. In the middle of the night. He was young enough that the strangeness of it still showed on his face. Sergeant, should I not wake the captain? It was the right question. It is always the right question, and I have taught it to every man under me. When you sense a wrong above your station, you do not act alone in the dark. You wake the man whose station it is. The chain holds the house up. A guard who decides everything himself is a guard the house cannot trust. But the captain of the night watch, I said slowly, is Captain Holt, and Captain Holt was put in his post this spring on the recommendation of the Comptroller's office. On the recommendation of Master Vale. I had not thought it through until I said it aloud, and saying it aloud I felt the floor of the thing drop away under me. I do not say Holt is bought. I do not know that. But I will not put a midnight warning about Master Vale into the hands of a man Master Vale lifted up, not until I know which way that man falls. Do you see the trouble, Pelham? He saw it. The eagerness went out of his face and something older came into it. Then who, he said, if not the captain, who do we wake? And that, of course, was the whole question. That was the trap closing. Because the house has a chain, and the chain runs up through the night watch captain, and the captain ran, by some thread I could not yet measure, back down to the very man I needed to stop. To go up the chain was to put the warning into Vale's own hand. To go around the chain was to be a sergeant of the gate making war, alone, in the dark, on a controller of the outer household. And if I was wrong, if the salt and the boots and the boat came to nothing, I would be the man who broke the chain over a smell on the wind, and the Queen's house does not keep such men. We wake no one, I said, until we have something a fool could not argue with. A smell is not enough. A boat is not enough. A boat is a fishing boat. A boat is a smuggler of brandy. A boat is nothing the Queen need hear of. We need to know what is on the boat and who steps off it and what Vale means to do with them. We need the thing itself. Then we go, and we go high, Pelham, not to the captain. Higher? I did not say how high. I did not yet dare. Go, the laundry stair, eyes on the water, Come back the moment a boat ties off, and not before and not after." He went, light-footed, up the river walk into the dark, and I turned back to my post and barred door and the slit of black water in the wall, and I settled into the cold to wait, and to think about the one piece of the night I had not told young Pelham, because I had only just understood it myself, standing there. Vale had not been afraid of me. A man caught in a true crime is afraid. He sweats, he stammers, he runs, or he begs. Vale had been annoyed. He had been annoyed the way a man is annoyed when a servant blocks a doorway, a problem of furniture, not of guilt. He had walked away certain he would have what he came for, which meant he was not afraid of being caught, because he did not believe what he was doing was a crime that anyone with power would call a crime. He believed he had the power on his side. He believed that whoever I ran to, if I ran, would be his man, or be made his man, or simply not care. He believed the house was already his. And the cold truth I stood in, on the cistern stair, with the river breathing salt up at me out of the dark, was that I did not yet know he was wrong. The waiting is the hardest part of the harness. Anyone can be brave for a moment in the rush of a thing. It is the standing still while the thing comes that costs. I have stood a great many watches in my life, and I will tell you that the body does not learn it. The body always wants to move, to do, to go. You learn instead to put the body somewhere it cannot betray you and to let the mind work. I put mine to the slit window and the black water and the cellar door, and I counted my own breaths, and I waited. A bell somewhere in the palace told the half hour, then nothing for a long while. The river ran. A barge somewhere out in the dark made a slow knocking against a piling. Once a rat crossed the foot of the stair and looked at me with the small, bright contempt of a creature that knows it can come and go where a soldier cannot, and went on about its business. I let it. I had no quarrel with the rats. And then Pelham came back, and he was running, and he was trying to run silently and not quite managing it, his boots scuffing on the river walk, and I knew before he reached me what he had to say. "A boat," he got out low, breathless. "Sergeant, a boat. It came up the river without a lantern, dark. No lantern at all, which no honest boatman does. You'd run aground. 2 men rowing, muffled oars," and he swallowed, "and it tied off at the water gate slip, right at the gate, as if it knew the gate would open." "How many aboard?" "More than the 2 at the oars. There's a covered middle, a deck cabin, low, canvas over it. I couldn't see in. But I saw Sergeant, I saw a man come up out of it onto the slip, and he was waiting, looking up at the gate like he was expecting to be let in any moment. And he wasn't dressed like a riverman. He had a good cloak, fur at the collar, and when he turned," Pelham's voice dropped further, "when he turned I saw a chain on his breast, a collar of office, heavy, foreign work, the links all square. I've never seen its like in Eldermoor. Sergeant, that's no smuggler. That's a great man. That's somebody. A foreign man of rank, with a collar of office, coming up out of a dark boat at a forgotten gate, in the dead middle of the night, expecting to be let into the Queen's house. And a controller of the household in river boots who had promised that boat it would not be turned away. I have been a soldier most of my life, and I have learned to feel the size of a thing before I can name it, the way you feel the weight of a load before you lift it. I felt the size of this one, and it went cold all the way down. This was not brandy. This was not a courtier's petty theft of candlelins and kickbacks. A foreign envoy, for that is what a man with a collar of office is. An envoy, an ambassador, a king's mouth, does not come secretly by night, by a hidden water gate, into a sovereign's palace, to talk of anything an honest man would talk of in daylight in the Queen's own hall. There is only one kind of business done at that hour by that door. The kind that must never be seen, because if it were seen it would be called by its right name, and its right name is treason. Someone in the Queen's house was selling the Queen. "Right," I said, and I heard my own voice come out flat and steady, which surprised me because inside I was anything but right. "Listen to me, Pelham, and listen well, because we have very little time and we will not get a second pass at this." The man on the slip was waiting on the gate. Vale had gone to find another way down. The gate I had barred was the gate they expected to use, and Vale, finding it barred and guarded, would not bring his envoy up the cistern stair into my hands. He would bring him up some other way to some other room deep inside, where no honest gate watch ever stood. The meeting would happen. I had stopped one door and they would simply use another, exactly as I had feared at the start. Unless I could find out where. You go back to the laundry stair, I told Pelham, and you keep your eyes on that boat and that man, and the moment he is brought inside, the moment that slip is empty and the gate they bring him through is shut behind him, you mark which gate, which door, which way they take him. Then you come to me. Do not follow them in. Do not be seen. You are eyes only, do you hear me? Eyes only. A dead guardsman tells no one anything. And you, Sergeant, you're leaving your post. There was no accusation in it. There was fear in it, fear for me, the particular fear a young soldier has the first time he watches an older one decide to do the thing that cannot be undone. I looked at the barred water gate. I looked up the dark passage toward the heart of the palace, toward the sleeping queen and her 2 sleeping children, and the foreign collar of office coming up out of the river to bargain them away in the dark. A guard does not leave his post. It is the iron of it. It is the whole iron of the thing. But a post is a promise, and the promise is not to the patch of stone under my boots. The promise is to her. The stone is only where I keep it. And there are nights, I had heard the old sergeant say it and never understood it until that one, there are nights when keeping the promise means leaving the stone. Yes, I said. I am leaving my post. And as I said it, somewhere far above us in the dark body of the palace, a single small bell rang once, a handbell, the kind a great man rings to summon a servant, and was hushed at once, as if a hand had closed over it. A signal. The gate barred, the plan changed, the word passed, bring him up the other way. The night had begun in earnest, and I was already behind it. I went up. Not the way Vale had gone, through the cellars, where I might walk straight into him. I went the guard's way, the narrow service stair behind the river wall that the watch uses to change posts without crossing the great rooms. It is steep and mean, and the stone is worn to a hollow in the middle of each tread by 200 years of soldiers' boots, and I went up it 3 steps at a time with my heart hammering and my mind racing ahead of my feet. I needed to do 3 things, and I needed to do them in the right order, because if I did them in the wrong order, the whole night would come apart. The first was to know where they meant to meet, and that was Pelham's task, eyes on the boat, and I had to trust him to it. The second was to find an ally, a man with rank enough to be believed and clean enough to be trusted, who could carry the warning where it had to go. Because here is a truth about the harness that the songs leave out. A sergeant of the gate, alone, with a story, is nothing. I could run to the Queen's own door and hammer on it, and the chamber guard would put me on the floor and hold me there as a madman. And rightly, because a sergeant who abandons his post to hammer on the Queen's door in the middle of the night with a wild tale of boats and envoys and treason is, on the face of it, exactly what a madman looks like. I needed a man whose word opened doors, and every such man I could think of, I now had to weigh. Was he Vale's, or was he the Queen's? An hour before, I would have said the question was foolish. Now I did not know the answer for a single name in the whole palace, and that not knowing was the worst weight of the night. The third thing, and this was the one I kept circling and shying from, the way you circle a fire that is too hot, the third thing was that, in the end, only one authority could stop a meeting between a great courtier and a foreign envoy inside the Queen's own house. Not the captain of the watch, not the steward, not even the high constable if I could have found him and known him clean. Only the crown itself. Only the Queen, or, if she could not be reached in time, the one other person in Harrowgate who carried the crown's own authority and would never, ever sell it. But I am getting ahead of myself, and that is exactly the error I could not afford. One thing at a time, up the stair. I came out at the gallery above the old kitchens, a long gloomy run of stone with the great hams and onions hanging in nets overhead, and the banked kitchen fires throwing a dull red glow up the far wall. And there, at the end of it, leaning against the cold flank of the bread oven with her arms folded, and her gray hair coming loose from its pins, was the one person in all of Harrowgate I should have thought of first. Mistress Etta Thorne, keeper of the household stores. I nearly laughed with the relief of it. Etta Thorne had kept the stores of Harrowgate for 31 years. She had counted in and counted out every sack of flour, every cask of wine, every bolt of cloth and pound of candle wax that crossed a palace threshold for 3 decades, and she knew better than the steward, better than the controller, better than the Queen herself, exactly what came into this house and exactly what did not. If a shipment of delicate goods that spoil in the heat had been arranged for the water gate at midnight, Etta Thorne would know whether it was real. And if anyone in the household was beyond Vale's reach, it was the old woman who had outlasted 6 controllers and feared none of them. "Sergeant Reyne," she said, before I had said a word, "you have a face on you like the day the old Queen died. What's burning?" "Mistress Thorne." I crossed to her fast and kept my voice down. "I need a true answer, quick, and I need you to ask me nothing first. Is there a shipment due tonight? Stores, delicate goods, coming in by the water gate after dark, anything at all, arranged through the controller's office through Master Vale." She went very still. The loose gray hair, the folded arms, the tired evening slouch of her, all of it sharpened in an instant into something hard and watchful. "No," she said, "there is no shipment tonight. There is no shipment of anything by the water gate, tonight or any night this season, because I have not ordered one, and nothing comes into this house that I have not ordered." A beat. "Why does Master Vale's name come out of your mouth at 1 in the morning, Sergeant, joined to the water gate and a lie about stores?" So I told her, fast low by the red glow of the banked oven, the salt, the river boots, the hooded lantern, the bar I set on the gate, the boat with no light, the foreign man with the square-linked collar of office waiting on the slip, the handbell hushed in the dark above us. I watched her face the whole time, and I watched 31 years of keeping the Queen's stores honest gather itself behind her eyes into a cold and terrible anger. "That," she said when I had done, and stopped and started again, and the second time her voice was steady as stone. "I have watched that man for 6 years. I have watched the books go strange under his hand, sums that do not sum, payments to merchants no one can find, charitable disbursements to houses that have no address. I have taken my doubts to the steward and been told I am a tired old woman who cannot read a new style of bookkeeping. I have held my tongue because a keeper of stores does not accuse a controller without proof, and I had only the smell of it." Her jaw set. "And now you bring me the proof walking up out of the river with a foreign collar on. Sergeant, do you understand what this is? Do you understand what a man like Vale sells to a foreign envoy at the water gate by night? It is not flour." "Tell me," I said, "tell me plainly." "I am a plain man, and I need to be sure of the size of it before I move." She told me plainly. "There is a treaty," she said. "You will not have heard the particulars, it is held close. It is the Queen's own work, the labor of 2 years. The realms of the southern coast, the salt ports, the river trade, Eldermoor has been quietly building a league of them, a bond of free trade and mutual defense, and the keystone of it is to be signed at the Harvest Court in 3 weeks. It is the great work of her reign, Sergeant. It will make this small kingdom safe for a generation. And there is one power that does not want it signed, the maritime crown of Vorin, the old sea empire across the strait, that has grown fat for 100 years on owning the salt ports one at a time, and would lose half its purse if those ports bound themselves to Eldermoor instead." Her eyes were terrible now, terrible and certain. "Vorin has been trying to break the treaty for a year, by bribe, by threat, by rumor. And tonight a man with a foreign collar of office, square links, you said. The square link is the Vorenti style. I have seen it on their factors at the salt market. Tonight that man comes secretly up the river to meet a controller of our own household who has been moving money no one can trace." She let it land. "They mean to buy the treaty's death from inside, Sergeant." Vale will hand them the Queen's secret terms, the names of which lords waver, the price each one would take, everything they need to break it apart before the harvest court, and Vorant will pay him a fortune to do it. That is the shipment. That is the delicate goods that spoil in the heat. It is the Queen's own kingdom, and it spoils very fast indeed once it is sold. I have stood in a shield wall and watched a charge come on. I have known the cold drop a man feels when a thing too big to fight is coming, and there is nowhere to be but where he stands. I felt it then, in the red dark of the kitchen gallery, with the hams swinging gently overhead. "Then we wake the Queen," I said. "We cannot wake the Queen," said Etta Thorne. "Not the way you mean, and you know it, or you would not have come to me first instead of running to her door. The Queen sleeps behind 2 chambers of guard, and the man who commands that guard tonight." "Is Captain Holt," I said. "Who is Vale's man?" "Who is Vale's man?" she agreed grim. "Or near enough that we dare not gamble the kingdom on it. If we go up the chain, the warning goes through Holt, and if Holt is bought, the warning goes to Vale, and Vale smiles and says, 'A tired old woman and a jumpy sergeant, of course, I'll see to it.' And by morning there is no boat, no envoy, no proof, and there is a sergeant of the gate dismissed for desertion of his post and a keeper of stores pensioned off for slander, and the treaty dies quietly in 3 weeks and no one ever knows why." She gripped my arm. Her hand was small and hard as a root. "We have one night, Sergeant. We have to take this to someone over Holt, around Vale and beyond doubt. We have to take it to the Crown itself, and we have to put the proof in the Crown's own hands before that meeting ends, because once they have talked and parted and the envoy is back on the black water, it is our word against a great man's, and our word is worth nothing." "The Queen," I said again, because I could not see another road. "Or," said Etta Thorne slowly, and I saw her come to it the same hard way I had been coming to it on the stair, "or the one other person in this house who holds her authority and would die before he sold it, who is awake every night this season because the prince cannot sleep for the storms, who has no ambition in him at all, which is the one thing that makes a man safe to trust with everything." She looked at me. "The prince consort." "Aldrich." The handbell rang again, somewhere far above once and hushed. And from the dark of the river stair behind me came the scuff of running boots, Pelham back already, his face white in the oven glow, with the word I had been dreading and needing in equal measure. "They've brought him in," he gasped. "The envoy, up the old chancery stair, Sergeant the disused one behind the muniment room. Master Vale met them at the postern by the ice house and took them up himself, 4 of them, the envoy and 2 of his men and Vale. I marked the door. The old chancery, the high room, the one that's been shut since the records were moved. They're inside it now. And Sergeant," he fought for the breath to say it, "there were 2 of our own guardsmen set at the foot of that stair. In our colors, standing watch on a door for a traitor. I knew their faces. They let Vale by like they were posted there for him. So, it was worse than one bought captain. It was worse than one rotten controller. The rot had fingers in the watch itself. There were men in the Queen's red who were not the Queen's." I looked at Etta Thorne, and she looked at me, and neither of us said the obvious thing, which was that we no longer knew how deep it went or how many it had, and that every step from here was a step taken half-blind among men we could not tell from our own. "The prince consort," I said, "now before they finish." "Go," said Etta Thorne. "I will go to the muniment level. I have keys to every store on it. No one questions an old woman with keys. I will get as near that room as I can, and I will be your witness to what comes out of it. You get Aldrich. And Sergeant," she caught my sleeve one more time, "when you stand before the prince consort, you say it plain and you say it short, and you do not let your own doubt into your voice. Men believe a plain man who is certain. They do not believe a clever man who hedges. Tonight you are the plainest, most certain man in Eldermoor. Do you understand me?" "I understand you," I said. And I went to find the prince consort, with a bought captain somewhere ahead of me, and bought guardsmen on a stair, and a foreign collar of office in a shut room 3 floors up bargaining for the soul of the kingdom, and only an old woman's faith and a young soldier's eyes, and my own bare word between all of that and the Queen. The Prince Consort kept rooms in the East Wing, near the children, because that was where he chose to be. He could have had the great state apartments next to the Queen's own. He kept instead a plain set of chambers a door away from the royal nursery, and the household had long since stopped finding it strange. Aldrich of Harrowgate had married a queen and had, so far as anyone could tell, no wish to be anything but a father who happened to live in a palace. The ambitious courtiers despised him a little for it. The household loved him for it, quietly, the way you love a thing that is exactly what it says it is. I knew the way well. I had stood watch in that wing through 100 nights of the prince's storms, and as I came up the east stair I was already thinking through the next wall I would have to climb, because the prince consort, like the queen, slept behind a guard, and if that guard was Holt's or Vale's, my whole night ended at his door. It was not Holt's. The man at the door of the east wing was old Brennan, who had guarded the consort's rooms for 11 years and would, I was as sure as I could be sure of anything that night, have walked into the river before he let a wrong thing past him. He straightened when he saw me come up out of the dark at a run, and his hand went to his hilt, and then he saw it was me and the hand eased, but only a little. "Reyne, you're a long way off your post." His voice was low and even and entirely unsurprised, the voice of a man who had seen the household do strange things for 30 years and trusted none of them on sight. "And running, and with no leave I've heard of. Talk to me before you take another step." "Brennan," I stopped a pace off, hands open and away from my own weapon, because a wise man does not come at another guard's post at a run with a hand near steel. "I have to see the prince consort. Tonight, now. It cannot wait for morning, and it cannot go through the watch." "Cannot go through the watch." Brennan's eyes did not leave my face. "You know how that sounds." "I know exactly how it sounds. It sounds like a man who has lost his wits or his loyalty. I have lost neither. Brennan, you have known me 14 years. Have you ever known me to leave a post on a whim, or carry a tale, or come to a man's door at 1 in the morning with a wild story for the joy of it?" A silence. The torch over the door spat and guttered. Somewhere behind the wall a child turned in sleep, and the old wood of the wing settled with a sound like a long breath. "No," Brennan said at last, "I have not." "You're the dullest honest man in the harness, Reyne, and I mean that as the high praise it is." He let go his hilt entirely. "Tell me what's true, short, and if it's true I'll wake him myself." So I told him short, the way Etta Thorne had taught me on the kitchen stair. The boat with no light, the foreign collar, the lie about the stores, the bought guardsman on the chancery stair, the meeting happening now, 3 floors up, the treaty warrant, the thing they meant to sell. I did not hedge. I did not say I think or it may be. I said what I had seen and what it meant, plain and cert, and I watched it land on old Brennan and turn him to stone and then to fury. He did not ask me a single question. When I was done, he simply turned, opened the door behind him, and went in, and I heard his low voice in the dark of the antechamber, and then a stir, a movement, a lamp catching, and within the space of 50 heartbeats the Prince Consort of Eldermoor came out into the corridor in a plain dark robe with his gray-shot hair loose about his shoulders and a face that was already, somehow, fully awake and fully grave. Aldrich was not a large man, nor a soldierly one. He had the look of a scholar who gardened, soft hands, a stoop, mild brown eyes. I had never in 11 years heard him raise his voice, and I will tell you that when those mild eyes found mine in the torchlight, there was nothing mild in them at all. There was a stillness in them that I recognized, because it was the stillness of my own trade, the stillness of a man holding something very heavy, very steady. "Sergeant Reyne," he said, "Brennan trusts you. Brennan trusts almost no one. Tell me what you told him and leave nothing out, and be quick." I told him, the 3rd time that night and the most important, and I felt Etta Thorne's hand on my sleeve in the memory of it, plain, short, certain. I told him about the salt and the boots and the gate I barred, the boat that came with no lantern, the man with the square-linked collar of Vorant, the handbell hushed in the dark, the bought guardsman on the old chancery stair, the room they sat in even now. And I told him what Etta Thorne had told me about the treaty and the salt ports and the great work of the Queen's reign, and what such a man sells to such an envoy by night, and that its name was treason. He listened without a word. He listened the way few great men know how to listen, entirely, with his whole attention, asking nothing until I was wholly done, his eyes never leaving my face. And when I had finished, there was a silence in the east corridor that I can still feel if I close my eyes, the silence of a good man weighing a terrible thing. "You understand," Aldrich said quietly, "what you are asking me to believe. You are a sergeant of the gate. You are telling me that the controller of the outer household is a traitor in the pay of a foreign crown, that the captain of the night watch is his creature, that there are men in my wife's own livery standing guard for his treason at this moment, and that the only person in this palace you dared to bring it to is me, because everyone else in the chain might be bought." His voice did not rise. It only grew, somehow, heavier. "If you are wrong, Sergeant, if you have misread a smuggler's run, a lover's tryst, a fool's errand, then I am about to do something that will tear this household apart, set guard against guard, and shame 3 innocent men, on the word of a sergeant who left his post. Do you understand the size of what I am being asked to take on faith?" "I understand it, Your Highness," I said. "I have understood it since the smell of salt on the wrong man at the wrong hour. I am not asking you to take it on faith. And here I did not plan it, it simply came out of me, out of 14 years in the harness and one old woman's hard wisdom. Here I said the thing that I believe turned the whole night. I am asking you to come and see. The proof is not in my word. The proof is in a shut room 3 floors up with a foreign collar inside it. I am not asking you to believe me. I am asking you to walk up a stair and look. If I am wrong, you will find an empty room or an honest one, and you may break me for it in the morning, and I will deserve it. If I am right, you will find your wife's kingdom being sold across a table, and you will be the one man in Harrowgate with the right and the rank to stop it. Either way, the answer is up that stair. Come and see." For a long moment the Prince Consort of Eldermoor looked at a plain, dull sergeant of the gate in the guttering torchlight, and then something settled in his face. A decision, made and done, the way I imagine a good king's decisions are made, without flourish, in the dark, alone. "Brennan," he said, not turning, "wake the men of this wing, quietly. Our men, yours, not the watches, no one whose loyalty you would not stake your life on. I want 6 I can trust at my back inside 10 minutes, and I want them to come unseen." He drew his plain robe straight, and in that small gesture I saw the crown settle onto a man who had spent his whole life refusing it, settle because his wife and his children and his realm required it, and be carried at once without a tremor. "Sergeant Reyne, you will take me to that room. We are going to go and see." And so we went up, the Prince Consort of Eldermoor in his plain dark robe, and old Brennan, and a sergeant of the gate, and behind us, gathering one shadow at a time as Brennan's whisper passed through the east wing, a small handful of guardsmen who could be trusted with the truth, up through the sleeping palace toward the shut high room where a foreign collar of office sat across a table from a traitor, counting out the price of a kingdom in the dark. We did not go fast. That was Aldrich's doing, and it was wise. A running party of armed men through the night palace would wake 100 sleepers and pass a dozen posts, and the word of it would run ahead of us up the back stairs to the very room we were stalking. So we went slow and we went quiet, hugging the dark of the old corridors, the 7 of us, the Prince Consort, Brennan, 4 East Wing men whom Brennan vouched for with his own life, and me. We went the long way, around through the disused upper galleries where the dust lay thick, and the old portraits of dead Harrowgate queens watched us pass in the lamplight with their painted, unmoving eyes. As we went, I learned the men at my back, the way a soldier learns the men he may have to bleed beside. There was Corin, young and lean and very quiet, who carried himself like a man who had decided something hard about himself a long time ago and never gone back on it. There was Hale, broad and slow-spoken, a former smith by the look of his shoulders, who I would later learn had once carried the Prince Joran out of a burning stable as a babe and had been the consort's man ever since. There was Marsh, gray at the temples, who had soldiered on the borders as I had and recognized me from it with a single nod that said more than an hour of words. And there was a fourth whose name I never learned, because of what the night did to him, and I would rather not write it before its time. And there was the Prince Consort himself, walking in the middle of us in his plain dark robe with no weapon and no armor and no rank visible on him at all. And yet there was not a man among us who did not feel, the whole way up, that we walked behind the crown. I have thought a great deal since about why that was. He gave no orders beyond the first quiet ones. He did not stride or glower or carry himself large. He simply went where the thing had to be faced steadily, without hurry and without hesitation. A man doing a hard duty because it was his and no one else's, and that, I have come to think, is what authority truly is when you strip the gold off it. Not the power to command. The willingness to walk up the stair yourself first into the dark toward the thing that has to be stopped. Vale had power. Aldrich had authority. Before that night I had thought they were the same thing. They are opposites. We came at last to the muniment level, the deep old archive heart of the palace, room upon room of shelved rolls and ledgers and sealed cases, the memory of 1,000 years of the realm in dust and vellum. The high chancery sat at the top of it, up the old chancery stair, the disused one, the one that climbed in a tight stone spiral behind the muniment room to the room that had been shut since the records were moved to the new wing. It was the perfect place for a secret thing. No one came here at night. No one came here much by day. And I understood this only when I saw it. It had its own old postern, the one by the ice house that Pelham had marked, so a man could be brought up to it from the river without crossing a single living part of the palace. We found Etta Thorne waiting for us in the dark at the foot of the muniment stair, pressed into the shadow of a great case of rolled charters, her keys silenced in her fist. She did not start when we came. She had heard us, slow as we were, and known by the careful quiet of it that it was friends. When she saw the Prince Consort, her old eyes went wide for a single instant and then steadied, and she dipped her head, and I saw the relief go through her like warmth through a frozen hand. She had not been sure I would get him. She had not been sure of anything. We none of us had. "They are still inside," she breathed, when Aldrich had bent close to hear her. I got as near as the lower landing. The room is lit lamplight under the door and voices low, but I could not make out words through the old stone. There are two on the door at the foot of the chancery stair in the Queen's red, and a third came down once while I watched and went out by the ice house postern and came back. They are passing in and out. Something is being carried. I think, her jaw tight, I think the bargain is nearly struck, Your Highness. I think they are at the part where the goods change hands. The goods, the Queen's secret terms, the names of the wavering lords and the price of each. Once those were in the envoy's hands and the envoy was back on the Black River, the treaty was as good as dead, and there would be nothing in this world to prove it had been killed, nor by whom. Aldrich was very still in the dark. I could not see his face well, but I saw the line of him, and the line of him was a man who had finished weighing and begun to act. "And then," he said, the barest thread of sound, "the two on the door at the stair-foot, are men in our colors standing for this. Can we take them quiet? I want no blade drawn that need not be, and above all I want no alarm carried up that stair before I am through that door. If they cry out, the room hears it, and the room has time to burn what is on the table." He paused. "But I will not have my own guardsmen cut down in their own house, traitors or no, if there is any other way. Quiet first. Steal only if quiet fails." "There's a way," said Brennan slowly. "The stairfoot has the old vesting room beside it, a door each side. Marsh and I go around through the vesting room and come on them from the flank while you and the sergeant hold their eyes from the front. Two from each side, no room to draw, no breath to shout. We've done worse on the border." Marsh grunted his agreement. "But once they're down, Your Highness, We've spent our quiet. Whatever happens after happens fast because the moment those two miss a watch call, the room knows. Then we will be fast, said Aldous, after Sergeant Reyne. He turned to me, and in the dark his mild eyes found mine and held them. You have brought me this far on your word, and your word has been true at every step. I will ask one more thing of you, and it is the heaviest, and you may say no, and no man here will think the less of you. When that door opens, I mean to go in first. I will not send soldiers into a room to do a thing that is mine to do. But I am no fighter, Sergeant, and there are at least 4 men in that room, and 2 of them are of foreign crown's hired hands who will not love being interrupted at treason. I would have a soldier at my right hand when I cross that threshold. The right hand is the place of most danger and most honor. Will you take it? I had stood 10,000 watches in 14 years and never once been asked. You are not asked in the harness. You are posted and you stand, and that is the whole of it. To be asked by the crown in the dark, with the kingdom on the table, to take the place of most danger and most honor at his right hand, I will not pretend my eyes did not sting. Your Highness, I said, I have been trying to take that place all my life and never once knew it had a name. Something moved at the corner of his grave mouth that was nearly a smile. Then take it, he said, and let us go and see. What happened next happened in the space of 100 breaths, and I have lived it slow 10,000 times since. Brennan and Marsh peeled off into the dark toward the old vesting room, soft as cats, their scabbards held still against their thighs so no steel chimed. Aldous and I and young Corin and Broad Hale and the man whose name I will not write went forward toward the foot of the chancery stair, openly, slow, 3 guardsmen and a robed figure, the way a watch rotation looks when it is nothing to worry about. Etta Thorne stayed back in the shadow of the charters with the unnamed man to guard her, which I was glad of, because what came was no place for an old woman, brave as she was. The 2 on the door saw us coming. They were our men. I knew the nearer one, a guardsman named Ferris who I had drilled with 12 times, a sour, ambitious fellow always sure the harness owed him more than it gave, and seeing his face there, set hard against us in front of a trader's door, was its own small grief. He pushed off the wall and put a hand up, palm out, the universal halt. Stairs closed, Ferris said. Captain's orders, turn about. His eyes went past me to Aldous and snagged there, uncertain, taking in the plain robe, not yet placing the man inside it in the dim light. Who's captain? I said, to hold his eyes, to keep them on me, to give Brennan and Marsh the half-second they needed in the dark behind. Holt's. Holt does not set watch on the muniment level, Ferris. No one does. There's nothing up there but dust. I took a slow step. What's up there tonight, Ferris? That wants 2 good men of the Queen's house standing in the dark to keep her own people off it. And his eyes flickered. That fatal half-instant of a man asked the one question he has no answer for. And in that flicker, Brennan and Marsh came out of the vesting room door behind them like the closing of a trap. It was over almost before it began. Brennan took Ferris from the side, an arm across the throat, and the man's own sword arm bent up behind him before he could draw a breath to shout, and bore him down to the stone, with Marsh smothering the second man the same way. A broad hand clamped over a mouth, a knee in the back. The 2 of them folded down into the dark with no more sound than the scuff of boots and one short choked grunt. Hale was on them in the next breath with the cords we had brought, and young Corin had both their fallen weapons gathered up, and within 12 heartbeats there were 2 bound and gagged traitors on the floor of the stairfoot, and not one cry had gone up. We had our quiet, now we had to spend it. Aldous did not pause to savor it. He stepped over Ferris's bound legs and put his foot on the first tread of the chancery stair, and I went up at his right hand, and Corin and Hale behind, and we climbed that tight stone spiral in the lamplight with our hearts in our throats toward the line of light under the high door and the low voices behind it. And it was there, 4 steps from the top, that the night changed its shape entirely. because as we came up to the door I could, for the first time, make out words through the old stone, and the words were not what I expected, and they stopped me cold with 1 foot raised. I had expected a haggle, a counting out, the dry, ugly arithmetic of a man selling his country. What I heard instead was a voice, Vale's voice, smooth and low and persuading, saying, "And once she signs, she will not unsign it. You know her. She is stubborn for the right as a mule for a barn, so it cannot be after. It must be tonight, and it must be done so that no hand can be traced to it. The draft is colorless and it does its work slow. By the harvest court, she will simply be too ill to hold a pen, and the regency falls to a council I have already." And the foreign voice, the envoy's voice, accented, square and cold as his collar, "You speak of poisoning a queen." A silence. My blood had gone to ice in my veins. Beside me on the dark stair, the Prince Consort of Eldermoor had stopped utterly still, and I heard him draw 1 breath, very slowly, and I have never in my life heard so much held in 1 breath. "I speak," said Vale, mild, terrible mild, "of an illness. Queens take ill. It is a sad thing. The kingdom mourns, and then the kingdom goes on under wiser hands, hands that understand that a small realm does not pick fights with a sea empire over a parcel of salt ports. You came tonight to buy the death of a treaty. I am offering you something cheaper and far more certain. Buy the death of the treaty's maker, and the treaty dies of itself, and so does every treaty she might ever have made, and so does this whole troublesome reign. The price is the same gold. The certainty is absolute." It was not the kingdom on the table. It was not only the kingdom. It was her. It was the queen's life, and behind that, because a poisoned queen and a seized regency does not leave a king's children safe. Never, not anywhere, not in any tale that has ever been told, behind that in the dark of my mind, 2 small sleeping faces, a girl who feared nothing and a boy who feared the storms. I had come up that stair to stop a theft of secrets. I stood at the top of it, having walked into a murder being planned word by word on the other side of a door, and the crown's own husband at my shoulder hearing every word of it, and the thing was no longer cold at all. It was as hot as anything I have ever stood inside. I looked at Aldrich. In the thin light under the door I could see his face now, and it was not the face of the mild gardening scholar any more, nor even the grave authority of the corridor below. It was white. It was white and absolutely still, the stillness of a man holding so much that to move at all would be to shatter. The stillness, I realized, of my own trade, the guard's stillness, the iron of not moving when everything in you screams to move, and I understood that the Prince Consort of Eldermoor in that doorway was doing the very hardest thing my whole life had trained me for, and doing it untrained on the threshold of the room where men were pricing his wife's death. His lips moved, barely a sound. "How long," he breathed, "until they have what they need from each other in part?" And from inside, as if in answer, came the small bright clink of coin on coin, and Vale's voice, satisfied. "There. Half now against the deed, half when it is done and she is in her sickbed." "We are agreed, then." "We are agreed," said the cold square voice. "But I will see the draft before I pay a single piece. Show me the means, Comptroller, or there is no bargain." A scrape of a chair, a drawer, and Vale's voice, proud, the proud voice of a man showing off his cleverness. "Here, a vial in a false book, see how the spine opens, colorless, odorless, 3 drops in wine. It is already in the hands of one who attends her cup. By the time you are back across the strait, it will have begun. It is already in the hands of one who attends her cup. There was a poisoner inside the palace, tonight near the queen. And the means was in this room, in a false book, in a traitor's hand, 4 steps and 1 door away. And once that door opened, if the vial was thrown in a fire or smashed or swallowed, the proof of the worst of it died, and we were back to a sergeant's word against a great man's, and a queen who would simply, sadly, take ill. I have stood at a great many thresholds in my life. I have never stood at one like that. Every instinct I owned said go now, break the door, take the room. And every scrap of 14 years' discipline said the door was thick and barred, and 4 men were inside, and the instant we crashed it, the vial went into the fire, and we would have stopped the bargain and saved nothing, because the means was already loose in the palace, and the only thing that could undo that was the proof, intact, in our hands. Restraint, the whole of my trade in one breath at the top of a dark stair, with the crown at my shoulder and a queen's life on the count of 3. I put my hand, very lightly, on the prince consort's sleeve. "Not yet," I breathed, so low it was almost only shaped and not spoken. "Not yet, your highness. If we break it now, he burns the vial. We must take the room so fast that no hand reaches the table. Give me 3 breaths to set it, and then we do not knock." The prince consort looked at me, and I watched him understand and master himself and trust me. The 3rd time that night a man had to choose to trust a sergeant of the gate, and the hardest of the 3, because this one cost him 3 breaths while his wife's death was priced behind a door. He nodded once. I turned to the men. I set them with my hands, soldier's signal, no words. Hale, the broad one, the smith, the strongest among us, him to the door, to take it off its old hinges with one drive of his shoulder if it would not yield, because a door slowly forced is a door that buys the room time, and a door that goes down all at once is a thing no man inside has time to answer. Corin behind him, fast and lean, first through after, straight for the table and the false book, with one task only: get a hand on the vial before any other hand could. Marsh and Brennan, who had come up behind us, to the 2 foreign men, the hired hands, the danger. And I would go for Vale himself, and Aldrich, I begged, with my eyes and one flat hard gesture, to come last, behind the steel, into a room already taken. And I saw him refuse it, and I saw him mean to come in second behind Hale because it was his to do, and there was no time to fight him on it. So I made my peace with it in half a heartbeat, and resolved to keep myself between the crown and every blade in that room or die doing it. I raised 3 fingers, lowered one. Inside, the cold square voice was saying, "Then we are." Lowered the 2nd. "Done, the gold is." I dropped the 3rd finger, and Hale hit the door. It did not survive him. The old chancery door, bar and hinge and a 1,000-year frame, went inward off its mounts in a single splintering crash, and we came through the wreck of it into lamplight and gold, and the wide-staring faces of 4 men caught in the one act no man wants ever to be caught in. I will give you the room as I have it burned into me: a long table under a hanging lamp, spread coin, 2 purses, one open, a folio of papers, the Queen's secret terms, her wavering lords, her careful work, half passed across the wood toward the foreign side. The envoy of Vorant, the square-linked collar, a hard, gray, clean-shaven man rising fast from his chair with one hand already going beneath his cloak. 2 of his men, hired blades, spinning toward the splintered door with steel half-drawn. Master Corwin Vale, controller of the outer household, on his feet at the head of the table with a small dark book open in his 2 hands, a false book, its spine hinged wide, and a glint of a glass vial cradled in the hollow of it, and on his clever narrow face in the instant the door came down, an expression I will remember to my grave: not fear, outrage, the pure, indignant outrage of a man who could not, even now, even at the very last, conceive that the world would dare interrupt him. Then it all moved at once. Corin went over the table, over it, vaulting the spread gold, straight for Vale's hands and the vial. One of the foreign blades cut at Brennan, and Brennan took it on his guard with a clang that filled the small stone room and bore in close, where the long blade was no use. Marsh closed the 2nd hired man against the wall, 2 old soldiers grinding down into the hard, wordless work of it. The envoy got his hand out from under his cloak, and there was a short, ugly blade in it, a poniard, foreign and wicked, and he did not strike at me or at the soldiers. His cold gray eyes went past all of us, found the plain robed figure coming through the broken doorway, knew it in an instant for what it was: the one man whose death would turn this from a foiled bargain into a catastrophe for the crown, and he lunged for Aldrich. That was the place of most danger. That was the right hand. That was the post I had been given on the dark stair and named, and I will tell you that I did not think at all. 14 years does the thinking for you when the moment comes. That is what the 14 years are for. I was between them before I knew I had moved, and I took the envoy's lunge on the cross of my own drawn blade and turned it, steel screaming down steel, and put my shoulder into him and drove him back off the prince consort and into the table's edge, hard, the breath going out of him in a grunt. And I did not run him through, though I could have, though every instinct said end him. He was a foreign crown's mouth, an envoy, and a dead envoy is a war. And even then, half of me was a soldier of Eldermoor counting the cost to the realm. So I did not kill him. I beat the poniard out of his hand with the flat and the pommel, and broke his nose with my elbow to take the fight out of him, and bore him down across the spilled gold with my knee on his spine, and his arm bent up, alive, ungentle, but alive, a prisoner, not a casus belli. And in the same handful of seconds I heard Corin shout, a wordless cry of triumph and effort, and I turned my head and saw him with both hands locked around Vale's wrists, and the false book fallen to the table, and the vial rolling loose across the wood among the coins, free of any hand, intact, its colorless contents glinting in the lamplight. Intact and no hand, we had it. For one bright burning instant, we had won. The bargain shattered, the envoy down, the foreign blades being ground into the floor by Brennan and Marsh, the vial loose and unbroken, the crown's husband alive and on his feet, the proof of all of it spread across that table for any honest eye to read. One instant. And then Master Vale, pinned by the wrists by a guardsman half his age, did the only thing left to a cornered, clever, ruthless man. He stopped fighting Corin's grip, went limp, sudden so that Corin lurched, and in the lurch he twisted, not to free his hands, but to bring his face down to the table, to the loose vial, his teeth bared, lunging to bite down on the glass and crush it and grind the colorless death into the wood, and the spilled wine of the night in his own mouth if he had to destroy the one thing that proved the worst of it. To leave us with a bargain we could call a misunderstanding, and a poisoner still loose in the palace, and no proof on earth of murder. And Broad Hale, who had come up off the broken door, swept the vial off the table with one great careful smith's hand a finger's breadth ahead of Vale's snapping teeth, and closed it whole and safe in his fist, and held it up over his head out of reach, and bellowed in the first loud human sound the room had heard, "Got it! It's whole! It's whole, your highness, I have it whole." And the false dawn, for that bright instant of winning had been exactly that, a false dawn with the real test still to come, gave way to the true and final shape of the night, which was not a fight at all. Because the fighting was done. 3 traitors and a foreign envoy were down and held. The vial was whole in an honest fist. The papers lay on the table, and now there was only the thing that no sword settles and no soldier may settle, the thing that had to be settled by the crown, in the open, by right and by law, with the proof in hand and the household roused to witness it. Now came the part that was not mine. Now came the part that was the Queen's. But there was a danger yet, and it was the danger I had carried up the stair behind my teeth since the words came through the door, and the moment the fighting stopped I said it aloud, fast, to the prince consort over the heaving and groaning of the held men. "Your Highness, the poison," he said it twice. "The means is already in the hands of one who attends her cup. There is a second one, a poisoner, inside near the Queen tonight. This vial is a sample. There is more in another hand by her chamber. We have stopped the bargain, but we have not stopped the deed. If that hand acts before dawn—" The blood went out of Aldrich's face all over again, and he did not waste a single word on it. He turned to Brennan. "The Queen's wine, her night draught, who carries it to her, who attends her cup?" Brennan's face had gone gray. The night cup is brought by the under-butler of the chamber service. Tonight that is," he stopped, and I saw the name land on him like a blow. "Tonight that is Jos Allerby, your highness. Allerby was placed in the chamber service this spring, on the recommendation of the Comptroller's office." The same thread, the same rotten thread, run all through the house, from the night watch captain to the bought guardsman to the under-butler who carried the Queen her cup. Vale had not bought a man. He had been quietly building a hand inside the household for a year, one placement at a time, each one a small kindness quietly done, and tonight he meant to close the hand. "Where is the Queen now?" Aldrich said, and it was not a question, it was a man already moving. "And where is her night cup?" "She takes it late," said Etta Thorne from the broken doorway. She had come up after all, old and undeterred, and was standing in the wreck of the door with her keys in her fist and her eyes on the spread proof on the table, taking the measure of it. "She works late on the treaty always, this near the harvest court. She'll be in her closet still with her papers, and the cup is brought to her there past the second bell. Your Highness, the second bell rang a quarter hour gone. The cup may already be poured. It may already be on its way to her hand. I have known fear in my life. I knew it then in a new and total way, the fear that is not for yourself at all, the fear of a thing perhaps already done that you cannot reach in time." Aldrich moved. "Brennan, Marsh, the prisoners, hold them here, you and Corin, bind the envoy fast and let no man near this room or this table. This is the proof of the realm, and it does not leave honest hands. Hail the vial, you carry it, you guard it with your life. You give it to no one but the Queen's own physician, and you watch him test it. Mistress Thorne, rouse the household, the true household. You know who is clean and who is not better than any of us. Ring the great bell if you must. I want this palace awake, and I want it awake honest. Sergeant Reyne," he turned to me, and there was no robe-clad scholar left in him at all now. There was only the crown, moving, with me. "We are going to the Queen, and we are going to get there before that cup does, and you are going to do at her door what you did at the water gate. You are going to stop the wrong thing from passing. Run." We ran. I will not pretend it was dignified. The Prince Consort of Eldermoor and a sergeant of the gate pelting down the chancery stair 3 treads at a time and out across the muniment level, and up through the waking palace toward the Queen's apartments, our boots thundering on stone that had heard nothing but dust settle for 100 years. The palace was rousing behind us. Etta Thorne had reached the great bell, and its first slow tolling went out over Harrowgate like a heartbeat, and doors began to open and lamps to catch and voices to call. And somewhere in all of it, the rotten threads of Vale's hand were waking too, learning their plot was broken, scattering or freezing, or, the one I feared, moving to finish the deed before they fell. We came up the great west stair to the Queen's level, and there at the head of it, where the corridor opened toward the royal closet, stood the chamber service post, and at it, carrying a covered silver cup on a salver, walking briskly toward the closet door where the lamplight showed the Queen yet at her work, was a neat, mild, unremarkable man in the livery of the chamber service. Jos Allerby, the under-butler, the hand that attended her cup. He heard the bell. He heard us come up the stair behind him at a dead run, the crown's husband and an armed guard, and I watched him understand in one terrible instant that it had all come apart, and I watched him make the choice that the cornered make, which was to try to finish it anyway, to get the cup to the Queen's hand in the last seconds left to him, to walk those last 10 paces and set it down and let her lift it, because a man already hanged might as well do the thing he hanged for. He broke for the closet door. "Stop," I roared, and it is a strange thing. I had been silent the whole night, the guard's silence, the whole iron of the thing, and now at the very end I was the loudest man in the palace. "Stop, in the Queen's name, set down the cup." He did not stop. He was 3 paces from the door too, the salver out before him, the covered cup, the colorless 3 drops in the Queen's own wine. I have never moved faster in my life, and I pray I never need to again. I crossed the corridor in the breath it took him to take his last step, and I did not go for the man. The man did not matter. The man could run. The man was already caught. I went for the cup. I struck the salver from beneath with the flat of my hand, hard, upward, and the covered silver cup leapt off it and turned in the lamplight, end over end, and the lid flew, and the wine went up in a dark arc and came down across the cold stone of the corridor in a long red splash that touched no living lip at all. It hit the floor. It ran in the grooves between the flagstones, and no one drank it. Allerby stood frozen with the empty salver still in his hand, and his mouth open, and the whole plot in ruins around him. And the closet door opened, and the Queen of Eldermoor came out into the corridor to see what the shouting was. I had stood in her presence 1,000 times and never once been seen by her, which is as it should be. A gate is not meant to be seen. I saw her now as I had never let myself see her. Not the crown, not the symbol I had given my life to, but a woman of middle years in a plain working gown with ink on her fingers and tiredness around her eyes, and her dark hair pinned back for long hours of labor, coming out of a room where she had been bent over the careful saving of her kingdom, into a corridor where her husband stood white-faced and breathing hard, and a sergeant of her gate stood over a thrown cup with his hand still out. And her own under-butler stood frozen with an empty salver, and her wine ran red across the stones at all their feet. Queen Saralind looked at the spilled wine. She looked at the frozen man. She looked at her husband. And then this is the thing I will carry to my grave, the thing that told me, finally and forever, that I had given my life to the right person. She did not cry out, and she did not faint, and she did not demand explanations in a rising voice. She went very still, the way Aldrich had gone still on the stair, the way I go still at my post, and I understood all at once where the prince consort had learned his stillness, and I understood that it was not weakness in any of them but the deepest strength there is. The strength to hold, to not move, to take in the whole of a terrible thing before you act, so that when you act rightly. Aldrich, she said, quiet level, tell me. And he told her. Standing in the corridor with the bell still tolling over the palace and the household waking around them, the prince consort of Eldermoor told the queen, plain and short and certain. Edda Thorne's lesson run all the way up to the top of the realm. What had been done that night and nearly done. The boat with no light, the foreign collar of Vorant, the secret terms half passed across a chancery table, the bargain not for the treaty's death but for hers, the colorless draft in the false book, the second vial already in a hand that attended her cup. He told her, and as he told her, I watched the Queen of Eldermoor receive the knowledge that men of her own household had that very night sat down to price her murder, and I watched her not flinch, and I have stood in shield walls beside brave men, and I have never seen anything braver than a tired woman in an ink-stained gown taking that news standing up. When he was done, she was silent for the space of 3 breaths. The bell tolled. The wine ran. The corridor was filling now, slowly guardsmen, true ones, roused by Edda Thorne, servants in nightclothes clustering wide-eyed at the corridor's end. Somewhere 2 small figures at a far door, a girl who feared nothing and a boy who feared the storms, drawn by the great bell, halted and held back by a quick-thinking nurse but watching their mother stand in a corridor and decide the fate of men. And then the queen acted, and I learned what the crown is for. Sergeant, she said, and she looked at me, the gate, the thing that is not meant to be seen, and she saw me. You struck the cup. Yes, your majesty. You knew what was in it. I had reason to believe it, your majesty. There is a man who can prove it. Broad Hale of the East Wing holds the second vial whole to give to your physician to test, and there is proof on a table in the old chancery, and there are prisoners held there, and there is this man. I did not point. A guard does not point. I simply turned my eyes to Allerby and let her follow them, who carried this cup to your hand and ran for your door when I called him to stop. The queen looked at Jos Allerby for a long moment, and the mild, unremarkable man could not meet her eyes, and that not meeting was its own confession. Take him, she said to the true guardsmen now filling the corridor, and hold him close and gently and let no harm come to him, for he will tell us much before this is done, and a frightened man tells more than a hurt one. And let no cup, no dish, no draught, no morsel come to me or to the prince consort or to my children from any hand until every hand in this household has been weighed and known. The kitchens are sealed, the cellars are sealed, the water gate is sealed. Her eyes flicked to me. I understand it was already sealed by a sergeant who would not bend a rule for a kindness. We will come to that, Sergeant. We are not done with you yet, and I do not mean it as a threat. She turned then and raised her voice. Not much. She never raised it much but enough, and the corridor stilled to catch it, and through the corridor it ran out into the waking palace, carried mouth to mouth, the way the true word runs when the rotten word has been cut off at last. "Hear me," said Queen Saralind, third of her name, standing in her working gown among the spilled wine. "There has been treason in this house tonight. It has been found, and it has been stopped not by me, for I was at my desk and knew nothing, but by my household, by a sergeant who smelled salt on the wrong man and would not be bought, by a keeper of stores who has watched and waited and kept her doubts honest for 6 years, by guardsmen who came up a dark stair behind my husband on nothing but a plain man's word, by an undercook and a chambermaid I have not yet met who answered an old woman's bell instead of a traitor's. This is the household. Not the man who sat down tonight to sell us, and not the men he placed and bought and bent. They are the rot, and we will cut them out root and thread by daylight. But the house itself held. The house held because it is made of people who will not bend the rule for the kindness, who will stand the dark stare, who will strike the cup. That is the crown's true guard, and it cannot be bought because it was never for sale, because it is not loyalty to me. It is loyalty to the right, and a queen is only worth guarding so long as she serves it. I have heard fine speeches in my life. I have heard generals before a battle and priests over a grave. I have never heard anything that went into me like that did, standing in that corridor with the queen's wine on the stones, because every word of it was true, and because she was right, and because for the first time in 14 years of being a thing that is not meant to be seen, I had been seen and named and counted. And then she did the thing that finished it, that turned the whole night from a crime stopped into a kingdom saved. "Aldrich," she said, "rouse the high constable, the true one, you know him clean, and the loyal companies, and seal every gate of Harrowgate, every one by land and water. The envoy of Vorant is not to leave this palace. He is taken in the commission of murder against our person, and he will answer for it, envoy or no. And let Vorant's crown explain to the world why its collar of office was found at our water gate by night with our death in his purse. The treaty stands. We will sign it at the harvest court as planned, and we will sign it stronger, because the world will know what one sea empire was willing to do to stop it, and there is no better argument for binding together against such a power than the proof of what it does in the dark." She drew a breath, and her voice, for the first and only time that night, shook. Just once, just slightly, the human under the crown showing through for a heartbeat before she mastered it. "And someone bring me my children so that I may hold them, and let them see that their mother is well, and that the house stood." They brought the children. It was against every protocol of a night like that, and the queen knew it, and she did it anyway, because she had judged rightly, I think, that 2 small ones woken by a great bell and held back by a nurse in the dark, hearing the palace in uproar and not knowing if their mother lived, would be more frightened by their imaginings than by any truth she could let them see. So the nurse brought them down the corridor, the Princess Malin and the Prince Joran in their night clothes, the girl marching out ahead bold and furious at being kept from the excitement, the boy hanging back pale and round-eyed with the great bell hammering his nerves, and the queen knelt right down on the cold stone in her ink-stained gown and opened her arms and gathered them both in, and held them. And over their 2 dark heads her eyes closed for one moment, just one, and I looked away. Because some things a guard should not watch even when he is standing right there. The Princess Malin saw me first. She always did see everything. She pulled back from her mother's arms and looked across the corridor at me where I stood at attention over the spilled wine, and she said, in the clear carrying voice of a child who has not yet learned that some questions wait, "Sergeant Reyne, why is the wine on the floor? Did you spill it?" And I, who am not a clever man, who never know what to say, found the answer somehow, because she deserved an honest one and a small one. "Yes, Princess," I said. "I spilled it. It was bad wine. I am sorry for the mess." "Were you the one who shouted? It was very loud." "Yes, Princess, I am sorry I woke you." She considered this with the grave thoroughness of the very young. "It's all right," she decided. "Joran was awake anyway. He's scared of the bell." But he won't say. And the Prince Joran, 10 years old and mortified, went scarlet in his mother's arms, and I caught his eye across the corridor, the boy who feared the storms and was ashamed of it, and I gave him the smallest nod I owned, soldier to soldier, the nod that says, "I have heard the storms too, lad, and there is no shame in it. The brave thing is to be afraid and stand anyway." He saw it. I think he understood it. He sat up a little straighter in his mother's arms, and some of the scarlet faded, and that, of all the things I did that long night, may be the one I am gladdest of. Then the household took the night in hand, the way a roused and honest household will. Word came up that the High Constable, the true one, a grizzled iron-handed man named Lord Davern, who had served 3 queens and could no more be bought than the river could, had taken command of the gates, and that every gate of Harrowgate, land and water, was sealed and held by loyal companies, and that no boat had left the waterside, and the envoy of Vorant's dark, unlit vessel sat captured at the slip with its muffled oars and its empty deck cabin and its 2 bound rowers. Word came that the prisoners in the old chancery were taken down under heavy guard to the keep, the envoy, his 2 hired blades, the bound guardsman Ferris and his fellow, and that the proof on the table, the spread coin and the folio of secret terms and the false book with its hinged spine, had been gathered up by Lord Davern's own hand before 3 honest witnesses and sealed, every page, so that no quibble could ever be raised against it. And word came at last of Captain Holt. I had wondered about Holt all night, the bought captain, the rotten link in the middle of the chain. The truth of him, when it came, was smaller and sadder than I had feared. Holt was found in his quarters, not fled and not fighting, but sitting at his table with his head in his hands, and when Lord Davern's men came for him, he did not resist. He stood and unbuckled his own sword belt and laid it on the table and held out his hands. He had not been a traitor in his heart. It came out later. He had not known of the poison, had not known the bargain was for the Queen's life, had thought himself merely doing the Comptroller a series of small administrative favors, a posting here, a blind eye there, the small kindnesses quietly done that the household runs on. And when he understood that night what those small kindnesses had been building toward, the man broke. He confessed everything. It did not save him. A captain of the watch who lets himself be bent, even in small things, even unknowing, has failed the one thing a captain is for, and he knew it better than anyone, and he made no defense. But there is a difference, the Queen said later, between a wolf and a weak man who opened the door for one, and she saw to it that the difference was marked in his sentence. He was stripped of his rank and his post and put out of the Queen's service forever in disgrace. But he was not hanged, as the envoys Blades and Allerby and Vale's truest creatures were not hanged either, but held for the law's slow certain justice. For the Queen would have it all done by law, in the open, by daylight, never in the dark, because the dark was the traitors' country and she would not meet them in it. But that came later. On the night itself, there remained one thing yet to be faced, and it was the man at the root of it all, and the Queen would not let it wait for morning. "Bring me Vale," she said. They brought him up from the keep under heavy guard, the Comptroller of the outer household, Master Corwin Vale, his hands bound before him, his fine traveling cloak gone, his river boots ridiculous now under his court coat, his clever narrow face still, even now, even bound, even ruined, wearing the ghost of that outrage, that incredulity, that a man like him should be brought up bound to stand on a stone floor among spilled wine and answer to anyone at all. The queen had risen by then and given the children back to the nurse, with a kiss for each and a quiet word, and she stood in the corridor with the prince consort at her side and the household gathered behind her, and she faced Vale across the spilled wine, and there was a silence in which the great bell, finally, was let to fall quiet. I have wondered since what Vale thought he would say, whether he had a defense ready, a clever turn, the controller's gift for making a wrong sum look right. If he did, he never used it, because the queen did not accuse him and did not rage at him and did not ask him why. She simply looked at him for a long moment, and then she said the only thing, I think, that could have reached past the armor of his self-regard and shown him the true size of what he had done. "Corwin," she said, his given name mild, almost gentle, the way you would speak to a man you had known 30 years, which she had. "Do you know what you nearly cost me tonight? Not the treaty, not the salt ports, not even my life. I would have given my life for this realm gladly any day. That is the bargain of the crown, and I have always known it." She paused. "You nearly cost me the thing I have spent my whole reign building. You nearly taught my household that the rule can be bent for a kindness, that the gate can be left unbarred for a coin, that a small wrong quietly done is the way the great machine runs. That is what you were really selling, Corwin, not papers, not my death. You were selling the idea that none of it is real, that honor is a costume and duty is a transaction, and every man has his price, and the only fools are the ones who don't take theirs." Her voice did not rise. It went, if anything, quieter, and quieter was worse. "And do you know how I know you failed? Do you know how I know the thing you were selling does not exist to be sold? Because of him." And she turned and she looked at me. "A sergeant of my gate," said Queen Saralind, "smelled salt on you at midnight and would not bend the rule for a kindness. You offered him exactly what you offered Holt, a small thing, quietly done, and a friend in high places to remember it. And Holt took it because Holt believed what you believe, that it is how the world runs. And this man," her eyes held mine, and I stood as still as I have ever stood in my life, "this man said no, to you with all your power. At 1 in the morning, alone, in the dark, with no one to see and no one to thank him, and every reason to believe that whoever he ran to would be your creature. He barred the gate anyway. He could not have known he would be proven right. He could not have known anyone would ever stand beside him. He had nothing to go on but the thing you said does not exist, and it was enough to break you, Corwin, because it turned out to be made of iron, and your whole clever empire of small kindnesses was made of air." Vale's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. And then I watched it happen. The outrage went out of his face at last, all of it, the way the kindness had drained out of it on the cistern stair hours before, in stages, the disbelief first and then the cleverness, and then the self-regard, until what was left was only a frightened old man in ridiculous boots who had wagered everything on the belief that no one would stand, and lost, because one dull, honest sergeant had stood. "Take him away," the queen said. "Hold him for the law. He will be tried in open daylight and stripped of his office and his name and his place at this court forever, and he will answer to Eldermoor for everything he has done, every strange sum, every vanished payment, every placement and bribe, the whole rotten thread of it pulled out into the light where it can never grow back. Bar him from this court for the rest of his days. He wished to be remembered. A flicker, almost grim humor almost. He will be." And they took him away, down into the keep, the controller of the outer household, into the law and out of the story, and I never saw his face again. The corridor began, slowly, to empty. The gray dawn was coming up at last in the high windows, thin and cold and clean, the way dawn comes after a night that has lasted a year. Lord Davern's loyal companies held the gates. The physician had come and gone and confirmed it, grim-faced. The wine in the cup, had it been drunk, would have killed the Queen of Eldermoor by the harvest court, slow and quiet and untraceable, exactly as Vale had promised it would. The vile hail had saved whole, the second one. The proof of the means was sealed away as evidence, and Broad Hale stood his post over it still, refusing to be relieved, because the prince consort had told him to guard it with his life, and he was a man who took an order to mean what it said. And me? I was still standing over the spilled wine, where I had been since I struck the cup, because no one had told me to stand down, and a guard does not stand down until he is told. The Queen saw it. Of course she saw it. She saw everything that night. She came to me herself, across the corridor, in her ink-stained gown, with her husband beside her and the gray dawn in the windows, and she stopped before me, and I looked straight ahead over her shoulder the way you do, because even then, even after everything, I was a gate, and a gate does not meet the eyes of the crown. "Look at me, Sergeant," she said. So I looked at her. "What is your name? Your whole name, I want to have it right." "Aldous Reyne, Your Majesty, Sergeant of the Queen's House Guard, River Posts." "Sergeant Aldous Reyne." She said it slowly, fixing it, the way you fix a thing you mean never to forget. "You left your post tonight." "Yes, Your Majesty." There was no use denying it, and I did not try. "I left my post. It is the one unbreakable rule of the harness, and I broke it, and I will answer for it however you see fit." "Why did you leave it?" And I found again that the true answer was the plain one, and the plain one came. "Because a post is a promise, Your Majesty, and I always thought the promise was to the patch of stone I stand on, but the stone is only where I keep it. The promise was always to you, and through you, to the right. When keeping the promise to the stone would have broken the promise to you, the stone had to lose, so I left it. I am sorry for the rule, but I am not sorry for the choice, and I would make it again." The Queen of Eldermoor looked at me for a long moment, and then she did a thing I have never heard of a queen doing before or since, and that I cannot write of even now without my eyes betraying me. She inclined her head to me, to a sergeant. She bowed her head a little, the way one honorable person bows to another, and beside her the prince consort did the same, and behind them, raggedly, not knowing quite why but knowing it was right, the whole gathered household, guardsmen and servants, and the grizzled constable and old Etta Thorne with her keys, bowed their heads too, in the gray dawn, in the corridor where the Queen's wine had run and been kept from her lips. "The rule," said Queen Saralind, lifting her head, "exists to keep my house safe. You broke the rule to keep my house safe. A guard who keeps the rule when the rule would betray the thing it serves is no use to me, Sergeant Reyne. He is only a clever holt doing small correct things while the house burns. You did the harder thing. You kept faith with what the rule is for and let the rule itself go, and that is not desertion. That is the deepest keeping of a post there is." She straightened. "You will not be punished. You will be raised. As of this dawn you are captain of the Queen's House Guard. The post Holt has vacated, and you will hold the chain of this house's safety in your own hand. And I think you understand, better than any man in Eldermoor, what that chain is truly for, and how easily, and how never it must be allowed to bend. I will not pretend I had words for it. A plain man does not. I went down on one knee on the cold stone, and I bowed my head, and I said the only thing in me, which was, 'I will keep your gate, Your Majesty, as long as I have breath.' And she touched my shoulder once lightly and said, 'I know you will, Captain. That is the whole reason I can sleep.' And that was the making of the promise, the second time in my life I had made it, and the first time anyone had asked. That is most of the story. There is a little more, and then I am done. The realm never learned the whole of it, not as it truly happened. The Queen judged, and I came to agree with her, for I sat in her councils now and learned how such things must be weighed, that a kingdom does not need to be told that its queen was nearly poisoned by her own controller in the pay of a sea empire. It needs to be told that a plot was found and stopped, that the traitors are taken, that the crown is well and the realm is safe. So that is what the realm was told. The trials were held in open daylight by law, exactly as she had promised, and Vale and Allerby and the envoys' blades and the truest of the rotten thread answered for what they had done, every strange sum and bribe and placement dragged out into the light. But the particular dark heart of it, the cup and the colorless draught, was kept close, told plainly to those who needed it and to no one else. The dark was the traitor's country. She would not give them even the small victory of a frightened realm. And the treaty was signed. At the harvest court, 3 weeks later, exactly as planned and signed stronger as the Queen had foreseen, for she let it be known, quietly in the right ears, what once the Empire had been willing to attempt in the dark to stop it, and there is no better mortar for binding small realms together against a great predator than the proof of what the predator does when it thinks no one is watching. The salt ports bound themselves to Eldermoor. The League held. It holds yet these years on, and the small kingdom is safe for a generation, as Edda Thorne said it would be, and I have stood guard at 3 of those harvest courts now, and watched the lords of the salt ports come in to renew their bond, and not one of them knows that the whole of it turned, one night, on the smell of brine on the wrong man's coat. Edda Thorne keeps the stores still. She is older and her hair is all gray now, and she has never once let me forget that she gave me the lesson that saved the night, plain, short, certain, and she is right, and I tell her so, and she pretends not to care and cares very much. Old Brennan guards the consort's wing yet, and young Corin, who vaulted the table, is a sergeant now under my command and a good one. Hale guarded the vial until the law took it and then went back to the east wing, and has never once mentioned that he saved the proof of the whole conspiracy with one sweep of a smith's hand. I mentioned it for him, at his commendation, and he went red as the prince had and said it was nothing anyone would have, which is not true, and is exactly why he is the man he is. The Princess Malin is 12 now and fears nothing still, and has decided she will command the house guard herself one day, and I have told her she may not unless she earns it, and she has informed me that she intends to, and I believe her. The Prince Joran is 14 and still does not love the storms, and still stands through them, and we do not speak of it, he and I. But there is a thing between us that does not need speaking, the thing of 2 people who know that the brave man is not the one who is unafraid but the one who is afraid and holds his post anyway. And me. I am captain now, and the chain of the house's safety is in my hand, and I have learned that it is heavier than the harness ever was, because a sergeant has only to keep his own post, and a captain must keep faith for every man on every post in the whole of Harrowgate, and teach each of them the thing it took me half a life to learn, that the rule is not the master, that the rule is the servant of the thing it guards, and that there will come a night for one of them when keeping the rule and keeping faith are not the same thing, and on that night he must know the difference, and choose the harder one alone in the dark, with no one to thank him. I teach them the way Edda Thorne taught me, plain, short, certain. I tell them, someone will come to you, one dark hour, with a small kindness and a hint of reward, and ask you to leave the gate unbarred. He will not look like a traitor. He will look like a tired, important man who is doing you a favor by remembering your name. And he will be certain you will say yes, because everyone says yes, because the whole great machine runs on small kindnesses quietly done. And the whole of the harness, the whole of the honor, the whole of the reason the Queen can sleep, it all comes down to whether, in that one unwitnessed moment, you say no. You will want to bend. It will seem so small. It will seem that no one would ever know, and that the rule is generous enough between sensible men at that late hour to bend just once. Bar the gate. That is the whole of it. That is the whole iron of the thing. I smelled salt on the wrong man at midnight, and I did not move and I did not bend, and I summoned the ones with the right to set it right, and a kingdom stood, because a sergeant of the gate kept a promise to a patch of stone in the dark, when it cost him everything and promised him nothing. Bar the gate, and when you cannot keep the gate and keep faith both, leave the stone, and keep the faith and go and wake the ones who can make it right. I have kept that gate 11 years now, as captain, and I will keep it until I cannot. And on the cold nights on the river side, when the tide breathes salt up the old cistern stair out of the dark, I stand my watch and I am still. And I remember that stillness is not the same as silence, and restraint is not the same as fear, and that the strongest thing a man ever does is the thing no one sees, the gate barred, the cup struck, the rule broken to keep the rule's whole reason, done quietly in the dark, for the love of something that cannot be bought. That is the post, I keep it.